Hey, what's up guys? I'm back. Another episode of B is for Build. It's getting started right now. About my last episode, my entire day thus far has been filled with more insurance garbage, but it's not interesting to anybody. It really doesn't apply to anything that we're doing here. So I'm just gonna keep it zipped until I have some definitive news, because honestly, I'm tired of even thinking about it. So let's think about the car. Let's focus on the car. So here's my goal for today. The main hoop, it's this big U-shaped thing for the roll cage that goes over my head in the cabin. I would love to figure out where that's gonna go. So to do that, first we're gonna figure out exactly where the body's gonna go, down to the millimeter, and then we can try and place our main hoop and stuff like that. That's my goal for the day. Let's get... Did you guys hear that car? That was ridiculous. It's almost as long as my intro. Let's get started. All right, as I mentioned in the last episode, the first thing that we're gonna do is center the body on the frame exactly where we want it. And then I'm probably gonna get ready to weld some stuff on here. Somebody did comment though in yesterday's episode, well, if you're welding the body to the frame, does that mean you're keeping it, or et cetera, et cetera? Just remember that this center section of the frame, this all gets cut out. So anything that we weld from here to here, we can just cut it all out together and we'll be completely fine. So, yeah, it's all temporary. It's all temporary. But let's get the measurements completely dialed in. Grab a ruler. Don't even use a measuring tape. They have a little bit too much play on the end. I'm gonna grab that ruler right there on the ground and a square and some other things and be measuring the frame rail against the pinch weld around here to try and square this thing up 100%. Okay, I got this body exactly dead center on the frame rails. This thing is 100% centered, horizontally, vertically, all that good stuff. It's dead nuts measured up. One interesting thing though, no surprise, so all these jack stands are set on the same height setting. Everything is the same height-wise, right? When you go, the frame's touching over here, or the body's touching over here. We're gonna go to the other side. The body's touching right there. And then what do we have here? The body is not using the jack. It's like off the ground here. So it just goes to show that, yes, this body is torqued a little bit from the accident, and this side is higher because one of these sides dug in, like down here, and then it torqued the whole thing. So anyways, yeah, I've already said it before, this thing shouldn't be repaired. I don't want to be using it, but we're going to continue to mock stuff up with it. So the next thing I got to do is find some handy dandy looking metal, cut 4 very equal pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and weld from here to here and weld this thing in place exactly where it's at. Now that the smoke has cleared, we have officially welded officially temporarily welded the body to the chassis. It's only in this really minimal spot, so I did 3 supports on each one. Hopefully these 2 would kind of hang, and then as the body tried to dive down, that would like post it up. I don't know. It's gonna do the job for holding it in the right place. And obviously, like I said, temporarily. Still getting a lot of comments about these frame rails. I don't know if I even address them again in this video or not, but anyways, yeah, they're gonna dive down. What I've been doing a lot of research and looking at is like how far we want them to dive down and where we want them to meet up with the frame. And I'm thinking actually I want this rail to go underneath the frame 1 inch. So it's gonna dive down starting probably right about there. It'll start to dive down, angling down like this, and then it'll come out and sit 1 inch under and go to about there, and then and I might weld it, I don't know. Anyways, got to figure out how we connect that directly to this piece of the frame, and then obviously our floor pan goes out and then over, because it's all about trying to get the seat to sit in here as low as possible for me. That's the big thing, is I don't, if we put our floor pan where it used to be, which is right here, and then we put this rail on top of it, our seat is going to be sitting not much lower, you know, it'll be bolted not much lower than this is right now, like say right about there is where it'd be bolted down. It doesn't really give me enough headroom. So it's something fun and technical to think about, but I'm not gonna waste too much time thinking about it now. What we gotta do now is grab the fenders, grab the hood, maybe the hood, probably the hood. We'll see how the fenders do. I don't know if the fender's even gonna bolt up on this side because this is all mangled. Again, not very fixable looking, is it? Insurance companies, you morons. So anyways, but we gotta bolt up the fender. There's a bolting point here and there's a bolting point here that I left along with it. I'm gonna bolt up the fender, test fit it right along here. That way we can see, make sure we're clearing the engine. If we're clearing the engine with the fenders and the hood, then we know we're in a good spot and we can start on the roll cage. So yeah, that's a really long way of saying it. I gotta test fit the fenders and the hood. Man, that was not easy. This the damage that was done over here completely warped out everything around here. So like that bolt hole that's supposed to be right here is inches down. And then even this one is totally at the wrong angle and the hole actually got like pinched so it's smaller. So it was like you had to basically rethread the bolts going in there. But I got it on there. So I got the two fenders on there. The fronts are resting on different things because I'm gonna go test fit the hood next, and it weighs a lot. So I wanted to get rid of the string. I was gonna do strings originally, but that's obviously not gonna work if we wanna get the hood on there. So we've got this kind of new setup going on here. I thought about building something a little bit more permanent, but there's really no point. So yeah, so the next step is we're gonna test with the hood, but I got some good news. So we got some good news. I definitely don't want to only focus on the bad news and the bummer parts of the insurance situation. The good news is I'm pretty sure I got a line on a replacement Z. It's reasonably priced. It's the perfect scenario. It was a parts car for a guy who had a project car Z. He was building it. The time has come that he's done with the parts car and he's basically got a shell left over. No engine, but a good title and some other things like that that I need. Perfect replacement for the Z. So I need to do a little bit more research. I can't say definitively that this is our car, but it's looking like I found a car at a reasonable price on the West Coast that I'm gonna be able to snag. So fingers crossed, I'm very happy about that. I'm very excited. This seems like this is gonna be great. And as far as the insurance company goes, you know, we can work on recouping our losses on the side and that will work itself out how it works itself out. But while that's happening, I know that this thing needs to be replaced no matter what, especially with the work that I've been doing with it today. It's like I can point out like 4 major spots. It's like no way these are gonna get fixed. So I wanna replace it, I'm going to replace it, and it looks like I found the right car to replace it with. So I'm very happy. Okay, moving on, let's test fit the hood, you know, over the hood area. It fits! I can't believe it. It fits. Okay, so it fits with room to spare. So you can see on this side it's sagging a little bit. When we look underneath here, you can see it's resting on that top part of the kind of like the valve cover area thing. God, I should know what that's called. Anyways, it's resting on that, but it's low. It's low. It's sagging over here. Now over here on this side, it's clearing that. But you can kind of see that little guy in the background that's poking up. That is the oil fill neck, and that's like a really high point in the engine. And we can bring that down. We can build a custom one really, really easily. And even with that there, it pretty much gives us a pretty good looking body line. So we did it. We fit the body on the car, but not only did we fit it on the car, we fit it as low as we could possibly go because there is no more room under that hood vertically. We did it, it fits. Ha! First try. Some interesting issues that I've noticed. So normally you got that gutter type thing that runs across here, and we obviously have that part. There's some access flaps that happen right here, but that's where our ITB goes. And so, well, I mean, sorry, let me reword that. That's where our engine goes. So we can't really like let water drain into there. So we need to rebuild that as like one solid piece, which has got me thinking maybe we should do that plus the hood as one piece of carbon fiber. I could buy a new carbon fiber hood. It's only like 650 bucks plus shipping, maybe 700-800 bucks. But then I don't know if, do we build onto it? What do we do? Maybe a fiberglass hood if we're gonna be molding onto it. So we got a few options. We got a few things to think about there, because obviously we can't have a cowl. That's what it's called. I always forget the name of that piece. It's called a cowl, and it fits in that space right there. And it basically, lets water in and manages the drainage of the water coming off of the windshield and stuff like that as you're not moving. But damn, it fits. It fits. Okay, I gotta pull that thing off of there because it's kind of sketchy sitting on there, and then we're gonna go from something that worked out really awesomely to something that's not gonna work out very well at all. All right, hood is off and safely stored over there. Now let's move on to something that's a little bit more of a bummer. Even with the transmission at this awkwardly downward angle that I don't think we're gonna keep because I think it would make it set too low on the ground, it's not a straight shot to our rear differential, and that's a problem. It means that we mounted the engine a little bit higher than stock, apparently, just a little bit. Or at least that's what I think. I haven't been able to measure it yet, and that's what we're gonna do here in a second. But if we mounted the engine any higher than stock, that means that we need to mount the rear differential higher than stock, which means that a lot of this is a bit of a problem area. But it kind of doesn't. You can see how much extra room we have with the strut towers. I really overestimated the amount that the body would need to sit down on this thing. So the inverse of the body sitting down is that the rear suspension setup kind of goes up, which is not really a problem to do. We already have to cut this stuff here, there, and there to take this center section out. So we're gonna have these drop downs and stuff like that. So what I wanna go ahead and do right now is this rod is pretty much the same size as that pin right there. That's an alignment pin for the drive shaft. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this metal, I'm gonna measure it to size, and I'm gonna cut it to size, and then we're gonna test fit it. We're gonna slide it over that pin and see where it naturally wants to follow as far as naturally going and how far off that we are on the rear differential to see if it's gonna work. That's gonna let me know how much, if any, that we're gonna need to raise the rear differential up in the car when we make this cut here. I'm getting into all of this now because it affects our roll cage situation. If the roll cage ties into anything that ties into that, we need to know that now. So, little chop, measurement, test fit, see how it goes. All right, so here's how this works. Like this is bottomed out on the shaft right now, so it's like aiming down. That's maxed out. So when you find the middle, the happy ground, it's right about here. That is 2 inches away from center line on the rear differential. So the rear diff needs to move up 2 inches if we want to make it a straight shot from the transmission to the rear diff, which we obviously do. It's stuck in there now, so I'm just gonna leave it. So the question is, what's the best way when we, so to make the frame rails dive down to start connecting up with the body, what we were gonna do is weld onto the, kind of existing stuff here, weld it on, keep everything here for the time being, weld on, go down, go over, go up, and we still may be able to do this, I'm not really sure. And then we're gonna cut out the center section, right? That way it keeps everything 100% level and parallel with each other and everything's all square. If we need to move this whole section up 2 inches, which it looks like we need to do, that gets a little bit more tricky. I was thinking one thing we could do is make a cut on both sides of this, make a cut, weld 2 plates on here and make one, and make them have matching bolts that line up 2 inches different than each other, like 2 inches higher than each other. So basically I would cut this and then bolt it back together, all in this space that's going to be wasted anyways, bolt it back together up 2 inches higher. That would mean that the bolts would only line up if it was still parallel and square and all right, just 2 inches higher. That's one idea I have. I don't really have any other good ideas. Just please, like, if you guys want to leave a comment, any ideas are greatly appreciated, but please just keep in mind, like, this is like a 300 and 400 pound assembly of metal here, and we have limited tools to be able to, kind of raise and lower and other things like that with this. So it's definitely tricky. It's not as easy as like just put it on jack stands or something like this. We've been very, very careful to build this whole thing with everything staying parallel and everything staying square. leading up to this. So this next step for me, the fact that it needs to come up a little bit, that's no problem. That doesn't really change anything. But it's, for me, it's the worry of ending up having the whole rear section like being like tilted like this compared to the body, or at a diagonal like that. That'd be catastrophic. So that's what we want to not have happen. Any ideas are welcome. I'll do some Googling and try and figure it out. So back there is the main hoop for the roll cage, and I'd love to test fit it in here. There's a really small space of where it can go, which is pretty much right along that line. It's probably gonna have to angle backwards and come up and around. And I think what we could do is hopefully rest the tubey piece, the round piece, on the edge of these jack stands, and with any luck, it'll touch on both sides. I'm not really sure, but let's go ahead and try to test fit it in the car and just kind of get a feeling for what size it is, how it looks in there, and how it's gonna respond with the rest of the build. Well, that is pretty great. It fits in here really nicely. It's exactly the width of the body, right to the two sides of the stock body rails. It comes up and runs along the headliner really nicely and comes back down over here. That is really, really fantastic. That's really good news that that's fitting in that way. So obviously there's going to be some steel down here that we're going to want to connect to, and then this is going to want to parallel that. So we may trim this up a little bit to be able to connect with this steel around here. I have to make a decision on where I want to start the floor pan. I think it might be on this line right here. But then what we'll do is we'll just trim this up right here, and then that can connect into that piece of metal, which will be an offshoot of this piece of metal. So I think that the next step is we got to figure out stuff about our roll cage. A long time ago, I showed you guys that I didn't just buy, you know, 2 frame rails from Jegs when I bought this 2-frame chassis kit for the 240Z. I bought a full-on thing, and it's supposed to look like this. Unfortunately, this is all the instructions that they give you. It's how to install a 4-link rear end, which I didn't buy, and I'm not using. And then they just give you this picture. And that's it. That's all that they give you. Now, it has some of these bars and their actual sizes listed out here, but none of these are cut to the correct measurements as far as like, so this bar could be long. They say they leave extra just for, I don't know, room for error or something like that. So Jegs is obviously not a sponsor of this build, and I would say that if you need legitimate instructions like I do about how to build these things, like angles of measurement and stuff like that, this is not the kit for you. But it was also fairly cheap. I think it was $600 or $700 before shipping. So we immediately went off of the game plan when those aren't our bottom frame rails, and then we didn't use the 4-link rear end over here because that was, obviously we're using the rear differential rear end from the M5. So we're off the reservation, we're off the plans already over here. And so we need to develop our own kind of based on this, because I have all of this tubing. The other thing that I have that is really cool is we have a legitimate tubing bender on the way to the shop. I think it gets here this Friday, but I'm not 100% sure. But we have a legit tubing bender coming, and it bends 1.75 inch tubing just like this. So in the future, and for this build, roll cage work, although it's never easy, will be possible because we can actually bend our own tubes. So that'll help if we need to go off of the plans for any more. So I think the next thing that I need to do before we drop our frame rails down, or while we're dropping our frame rails down to support this roll cage, is we need to design the cage that's going to go inside this car. So the next thing I'm going to do is take a ton of pictures and measurements of what we have right now, and then we can figure out how to modify it. Ran into an interesting thing just now that I noticed. So while I was, doing my homework, getting my measurements all taken for a roll cage class tomorrow, I noticed that it was looking like the differential was off center over here, because the engine and the transmission is off center. It's slid over this way, right? So it should be 1 inch over this far, misaligned. So then I would expect this rod coming out of here would sit 1 inch too far this way. And you notice it's like 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches too far that away. So I started measuring the differential, and the diff sits in the car offset by like 2.5 inches to the left, to the passenger side. Super bizarre, super bizarre. So I went and took a look at our driveline, and this is how it's used to operating. So it goes, this is then it connects into the transmission. So we're looking at it a little bit backwards here. That's the front of the car. Goes to this carrier bearing here, to this, whatever it's called, yoke or I don't know, thing, that allows it to wobble at a different thing. And then it goes into this thing back here that allows it to, this thing, it moves. This thing moves, although it probably doesn't like to move a lot. That's tough. I doubt that was moving on every single rotation if it's this hard to move. That thing is probably the thing that was moving on every single rotation. But anyways, this thing came off of a transmission that was straight in the middle of the car, went to this thing, which does a thing, and then must have went over 2 inches. So tomorrow morning, I need to call my drive shaft guy. I'm gonna call up the guy that helped me with the BRZ. He saved my ass on the BRZ. He will know things about things. I'm gonna take pictures of this. I'm gonna send it off to him. He's the guy that I'm gonna have do the work for the drive shaft, for this drive shaft, to transform this bad boy to be our tiny little guy that's gonna work in there. And so I think I wanna give him a call tomorrow and ask him some questions about this. All right, guys, I think that's where I have to end this one. We got a lot to handle tomorrow. We got to figure out how the roll cage goes. We got to figure out how the frame rails go down. We got to figure out how the drive shafts. Lots of stuff to do tomorrow. Very excited to do it, though. I will keep you guys up to date with all the random nonsense garbage that's going on with the insurance. I've been promised a call tomorrow to tell me the end all be all, just like I was promised today. So don't hold your breath on that, and I won't either. I really shouldn't. I got some weird chest pains going on. I think it's bubbles. I had a beer off camera. Anyways, good day today. Good day in the shop. I'm very happy about all this stuff. The engine fits. The body fits. Boys, we got ourselves a car. We really got ourselves a car at this point. So that's it. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you all, and I will see you soon. Please remember to like and subscribe. Well, I already said that. You know, smash all the buttons. Bye!